All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Google's Decoding Race conversation series. Those of you who don't know me, I'm David Drummond. I now work at Alphabet and have been around Google for a while. We have a great program for you. This is actually the fourth conversation in the series. We've been hosting these conversations on race at our campuses around the country, around the world. We plan to do many, many more of these. So please stay tuned. You know, I've been a sponsor of one of the sponsors of this series. We think it's critically important that we engage on these topics of race, systemic race, institutional racism, and how we get through these things, and inclusion in our industry and beyond. And it's really important for us to get the best thinkers on this topic in here to help us work through this. We're trying to get more engagement and more understanding and really be open about these issues so we can sort of maybe disrupt racism a little bit. So with your help, we'll start. What we're going to do today is we are very, very lucky and honored to have my good friend Van Jones, who needs no introduction, and unless you were, yeah. So just confirm that. Just confirms that none of you were under a rock the last few months, and you know him well. And
I will say he uses the term "good friend" loosely because good friends don't humiliate other friends on the dance floor. I will say that, but go ahead.
Inside joke. Look it up on YouTube. Anyway.
Terrible.
Anyway, so Van and I are going to have a bit of a conversation for a half hour or so, and then we're going to pivot into a panel that Van's going to lead, and the panel is going to be Programming and Prejudice. Can computers be racist? And we have a great panel to discuss this with Van, who I will introduce when we get done. So why don't we just get started? So Van, this is the question I'm sure everybody wants us to start with. But after 8 years of the administration of our first black president, we have an election in which openly racist rhetoric is part of the conversation. Things that we thought were gone, ways of talking about the country, ways of talking about race seem to have been normalized. And you've talked about this a lot, and everybody's been thinking and reeling over the result. What happened, and what do we do next? Simple question.
Do you have any tough questions, sir?
Simple question.
Well, let me just say a couple things. The data matters.
Yeah.
And this is, I did a special called The Messy Truth. This is a messy thing. And people want it to be either all race and racism or not race and racism at all. And either one would be probably more comforting for people, but it's actually a big mix. So you do have a phenomenon that's very hard for liberals to get their brains wrapped around. You had a bunch of people, and it's a small number, but a non-trivial number of people, who were actually delighted, mostly white voters, delighted by some of the racially inflammatory speech of Donald Trump. Those people are called bigots, okay? So it's a technical term, you guys can. And I think for most liberals, you're either racist or you're anti-racist. You're either sexist or you're anti-sexist. You're either a bigot or you're an anti-bigot. So people got confused because then, in the context of that whole thing, 50 million Americans went out and voted for Donald Trump. And so then liberals had something that we call a freak out, like a complete meltdown, because suddenly they thought that there were 50 million people in the Klan and no one had told them, you see? So they're like, holy Toledo, this is awful. Oh my God, it was just horrible. So I want to say, it's not that. It's not that. It's something that's less alarming but more disappointing. There's a big section of voters who were not delighted by those comments, who actually found them somewhat distasteful, but not disqualifying. And I think that is where the country is, that you have people for whom they wouldn't say that stuff, they certainly wouldn't say it publicly, they wouldn't be proud if their kids said it, but it's not disqualifying. I went and talked to those voters. I went to Ohio. I went to the bluest county in Ohio that had been blue since '72 and flipped to Trump. And I talked to a family of white Obama voters who had voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump. And I talked to them. And what came through very clearly was this election was decided by about 79,000 people like them in 3 states. I mean, Hillary Clinton won by 2 or 3 million votes. But in the Rust Belt where we had the breakdown, it was in 3 states total, 79,000 voters. And what those 79,000 voters said was, they said, Hillary Clinton talked to the special interest groups. She talked to the minorities. She never talked to us. We work hard. Nobody came when our factories closed. Donald Trump came, and we voted for him. Now, that's where you got some people you'll never get you, but those people, for them, it wasn't disqualifying. They had other pain. So what I'll say is this. This election we thought was going to be a referendum solely on bigotry in the Republican Party. It also became a referendum on elitism in the Democratic Party, and we've got to deal with that too.
So I get you. I mean, you want to have empathy and understand where people are.
Yeah.
Can you do that and still sort of resist? Like, are you letting people off the hook? So when you got people who say, well, it wasn't disqualifying, why the heck not? Right? And shouldn't we take people to task for that?
Yes, but the spirit in which one does that matters. Mm-hmm. If you think that all his voters are bigots, then that's one thing, like overt alt-right, like the white supremacist stuff, like the white nationalist stuff, wish they had a little mustache. If you think they're all like that, then it's a particular kind of stance. You can't compromise with that. But if we just didn't love them enough and they didn't love us enough, it's like, I don't hate you, I just didn't like you enough to help you. That's messy.
Yeah.
That's messier. And I don't know how to deal with that. And that's part of the confusion. That's part of what we have to create together. How do we deal with, we're used to certainty, like I like you or you suck. This is, I would like you if you sucked a little bit less, but I don't want to be the person who's sucking, making you suck worse, and it's confusing, and that's where we are.
So what about Americanism? So, in a lot of ways, this election showed sort of different competing visions of what it is to be American. Do you think that a unified sense of that and a collective sense of that is still possible, and how are we going to get there if we ever had, query whether we've ever had it in the past, but how do you feel about that? So we seem very divided.
Yeah.
We seem to have some folks who think, kind of the Trump vision of the world is what America is, and we have other folks who think, no, it's about pluralism, it's multiculturalism. What's your view on how to deal with that?
You're going to have 25% of people who are Trump and worse, and you're going to have 25% of people who are probably like y'all, mostly. I mean, in terms of getting the joke about how important it is to have diversity, cognitive diversity, like even if you can't deliver on it, you understand it, you're for it. And you have 50% of people in the middle who are not having the conversation at all most of the time. You got to remember, most people relate to politics the way I relate to sports, which is I don't know anything about it. And I would embarrass my children if I tried to speak about any of these topics. And so one day before the Super Bowl, I asked my son, which team are we for? And then that's the team I'm for. Like, I'm not into sports. Most people are not into politics. And so these issues, which for us, we struggle, we think about all the time, this is all, and so it becomes tribal. Here's what I think. If you're a liberal, if you're on the left like I am, I'd rather criticize myself than criticize somebody else. And what I'll say is, I think that we've made a mistake. I think that in our zeal to include a lot of people who have been left out, we sometimes forget to mention that our vision for America really does have a place of honor and dignity and respect for everybody, including those white guys who have been laid off and who are the salt of the earth in red states and who vote for Republicans, that we love them too, that their struggle is our struggle too. And I think that when we don't say that, or frankly, if we said it, it would just be phony because we don't feel that, I think we leave a door open. Yeah. And so what I fundamentally think is that the pluralist vision, we have to get even more pluralist on it. Mm-hmm. We have to include more people on it. We have to, look, when it gets harder to love harder, right? That's the response, I would say.
Yeah, you've been working on the love army, right?
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I offended some people, which never happens when I talk. So, but there's a truth to this, even though it may sting a little bit. In talking about the alt-right, which is just a kind of a rebranding for horrible, racist, bigoted people who should just be ashamed of themselves, but now they call themselves the alt-right. In talking about them, I said they built a little hate army, and they took over our government. And we need to build a massive love army and take it back. And I said that to a reporter for Rolling Stone, and that became his headline. And now suddenly, we put up a page, and literally tens of thousands of people are signing up to be a part of something called the Love Army, lovearmy.org. And here's what I think about it. There's going to be a battle on three fronts. One is about personnel. Who does Trump hire? Who does he put on the Supreme Court? That's a big fight. I don't think I have much to add to that fight. There's going to be a fight around policy. Repeal Obamacare, et cetera. That's a big fight. There's a lot of people going to lead that fight. Much to add to that. But the third fight, which we'll miss if we just focus on personnel and policy, is the fight about principles and values. And does everybody count? And does everybody matter? And that's what I want to fight about. I want to fight about the principles. And let me just say a couple things, because a lot of times people see this conversation as a black and white thing. And I want to say, it's way deeper than that. Look, the Muslim community in the United States, I just want to say something about the Muslim community in the United States. If a Muslim family moved next door to you, you would be the happiest person in the world because the chances of your children getting in trouble just went way down, way down. The Muslim community in the United States is unreal. They have the highest education attainment for women in the country. They are entrepreneurial. They have one of the lowest crime rates, and in most cities, they have the lowest crime rate. This is faith and family. The Muslim Americans are the model community. Okay? That's who they are. That's what they are. But you're going to take a model community and shove it to the corner and rub its nose in dog poop and then create the one thing that you say you don't want. You can't take good people and mistreat them and not open the doorway for extremism. In our country, we have, if a typical Muslim family is the family that most people want. It's a family that, frankly, Donald Trump wishes he had. It's a family that's based on, I'm not trying to be rude, but we're not dealing with reality. So this is not just about black and white. This is about, are we going to really look honestly at the country? When you talk about the Latino community, you talk about undocumented people and this sort of thing. If you take the undocumented folks out of our country, the whole thing stops. Service sector stops. Agriculture stops. Construction stops. You can't run the country without some of these people. So we're attacking the best in our country in the name of Americanism. Right. I say that's a cheap form of patriotism. I want a deep form of patriotism that says, you know what? That statue in that harbor that says, send me you're tired and send me you're poor, doesn't have any qualifications on it with regard to the shape of your eyes or what language you speak. It says send them all because we're the kind of country that can get the best out of them. And I'm not going to let that go. I'm not going to let that go for Donald Trump or anybody else.
Great. It's great sentiment. So, another comment you made in the Rolling Stone interview was that sort of progressives had sort of there were what you said, there were several things at stake in the election. I mean, there was the Supreme Court, there was the House, there was the Senate, there was the presidency,
5 things.
and I didn't. And progressives lost them all.
All 5.
Right. So I want you to talk about that a little bit, but I also want you to it's something you and I have been talking about a little bit. Okay, if progressives and communities of color are going to, we're starting a bit of a political winter, if you will. What are the other things we should be focused on?
Absolutely.
And so what is, we've talked about economic development, we've talked about entrepreneurship, we've talked about all these kinds of things, and whether or not we need to pivot to that more. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, what I was saying was that 5 things were on the ballot. The presidency, we lost. The Senate, we lost. The House, we lost. The Supreme Court, gonna lose. And the character of the country. Who are we as a people? And I think that's the heartbreak. That's why people are hurt. Because we grew up thinking that the country was moving in one direction. We grew up thinking that bullies don't win in the end. We don't watch French cinema, right? We expect happy endings. That's so that kind of like, I was like, wait a minute. There's some M. Night Shyamalan and stuff. So what a twist. So where I think we have to now turn is to say, guess what? Maybe, and again, some of you are certainly not liberals, and I appreciate your patience with this conversation. But for liberals, I think a lot of us got kind of soft under Obama. I think we kind of thought, well, we're going to be just fine, and we didn't notice that we lost the House, we lost the Senate, we lost a bunch of state houses, we lost 6,000 Democrats in office, and we still didn't get the hint that maybe we weren't connecting with a lot of people in the country. And so this is a wake-up call for us. Again, we can make it be, and we can talk about bigotry in the other party. The problem with the Republicans right now is that their main claim is that they are a party of colorblind meritocracy. But their hypocrisy is they've also let a bunch of bigots come and stay, and they haven't run them out aggressively, and they should. We claim to be the party, as Democrats, of the working class and that kind of thing, but we've also let a lot of elite snobbery sneak in, where we are putting people down, red state voters are stupid, and all this sort of stuff, which is, terrible. So we have our blind spot and our hypocrisy as well. So we've now been somewhat humbled. Now we've got to expand our hustle. We've got to be on this long march back to try to become even more pluralistic, include more people, people who may have felt left out or disrespected, but we also can do a lot more. DC writes the laws. Silicon Valley writes the code, okay? Silicon Valley writes the checks. Silicon Valley can move capital. Silicon Valley can move conversation. Silicon Valley can do a lot. I was in Washington, D.C. in 2009 when Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we still had real tough headwinds because other power centers like Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, Madison Avenue were not necessarily on board. So this is a complex power system. And I think that economic development, betting on the genius that's being left out. Silicon Valley runs based on genius. And yet, 30 minutes from here in Oakland, you've got every kid, every kind of kid ever born is 30 minutes from here in Oakland. Oakland is a 300,000 person town with 36 languages spoken in the public schools. So you've got every kind of kid ever born 30 minutes from here, and most of them feel that this may as well be on the other side of the moon. So how do you get that genius here, but also how do you get your intellectual and financial and social capital there? That's not determined by who the president is. That's determined by who you are. And I think that now we're all on trial. What do you do when you can't just hope Obama fixes it? What do you do now? Who are you now? That's the question.
So yeah, that's great. So what are some things we can do, and how do you connect this to sort of the discussions we've been having, the efforts we've been making to make our industry more diverse?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is we often try to make rich organizations more diverse, and that's a tactic.
Yeah.
But we also could make diverse organizations more rich. Now see, that would also be good, right? You do have folks out there that are entrepreneurial and they have their hustle on, they're doing stuff, they're in the Latino community, they're in the black community, they're in the Asian community, they're in the Native American community, they're in poor white communities. You got folk out there with hustle and with ideas, but we often don't know how to get them invested in. And so I think we have if you think about it, we have two ways to win. Getting the wealthy organizations, the successful organizations more diverse, but also getting the diverse organizations more successful. And between the two, you can create an ecosystem. I think that's the right way to go. For me, we have a project, an initiative at the Dream Corps where I work called Yes We Code. Not Yes We Can, we did that twice. Yes We Code. The late rock star Prince helped me get that started because his heartbreak was after Trayvon Martin's killer was exonerated by the jury. He said, why is it that if you see a black kid wearing a hoodie, you think, well, there goes a thug. But if you see a white kid wearing a hoodie, you say, well, there goes a technology kid. Like, why is that? And I said, well, maybe because of racism. And Prince said, maybe, or maybe we haven't created enough black tech kids. Maybe that's the breakdown. And so what I would like to say is that was, Yes We Code or Black Girls Code, all the different groups that are trying. All-Star Code, there's a whole list. A little bit of mentorship goes a long way for those groups. You may not be in a position to hire somebody right now, but you will be better and they will be better for the effort, for just the communication. The kinds of ideas and problems that people are struggling with would blow your mind. If you talk to a Filipina kid in foster care in Richmond, you will see 1,000 problems that technology might be able to solve that you don't know exist. If you talk to a Latina, lesbian, who's 27 years old, who is trying to figure out some way to make it in Arizona right now, where she has to help a family that doesn't understand her, she has 1,000 problems that technology might be able to be tweaked, but we don't have those conversations because we're in our own bubbles. And I think that it's unbelievable. One relationship can completely change what you're able to see and do. And because you guys now are the last hope, smart, good people here who are empowered, who aren't encumbered by what's going on in DC are really the last hope. The decisions that you make over this next year are going to be some of the most consequential decisions that you will make in your life and that will be made in this country.
Well, I just wanted to follow up and I don't know about challenge, but
yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of things we can do outside of government, but do you want to give up on that? So you're talking about reaching those kids in Oakland, right?
Right.
Isn't the highest leverage thing to do to fix the public schools, right? To make sure some of these things that are government driven are working better and serving communities, as well as deploying technology and doing whatever we can do as individuals and as companies.
Yeah, look, it's messy because minimally you have four corners on the chessboard.
Yeah.
You've got DC and government, you've got Wall Street and finance, you've got Silicon Valley and technology, and you've got Hollywood and media. And all of these systems interact with each other. Only thing I'm saying is, if the only thing that you're doing, and you're a Googler, you're one of the most powerful people in the world, whether you feel that way or not. But you put you next to the other 7 billion people, you're one of the most powerful people in the world, period. If the only thing that you're doing is biting your nails and hoping that Donald Trump does better, you could do a lot more. So I encourage it.
Great. Well, let's all give Van a lot of good thanks for
Thank you, brother.
Great conversation. I think the most important things that he's pointing out have to do with what we can do, right? And we don't have to be so dispirited There's lots of things we can get out and do. Now's the time, probably more than ever.
And let me say something about the Love Army, by the way. If you go to lovearmy.org and sign up, we're going to do 3 very simple things. Like I said, some of the best people in the world are going to be fighting on personnel and policy, and we'll back them up and love them. But on principles and values, that's where we're going to weigh in. We're going to do 3 things. We're going to be supporting nationwide teach-ins, so that if people, they know they're supposed to like the Dreamers, but they don't know what a sanctuary city is and why it is. So we're going to be, with the teach-ins, we're going to be helping people understand the Dreamers, the Muslims, trans issues, women's issues, all these things that we assume everybody knows. People need help. We're also going to be doing something I think that might surprise people. We're going to have a lot of parties. We're going to have DJs and promoters because we're not going to let this man steal our joy. Don't forget, we're the cool ones. We're the cool ones. And I'm not inviting David to the dance-off, ever. And don't compete with him on that. You're going to be humiliated. It's horrible. And don't go on YouTube either. He's just, anyway. And then, but the third level is if you can put 20,000 people in an arena, 30,000 people in an arena for an agenda that sounded to most of the world like hatred, we can put 20 or 30,000 people in an arena for something that sounds like love, and we're going to do that too. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
All right, bro. Thank you.